Meeting number 4 is organizing the unit. You pretty much know what your objectives and your activities are going to be. And when you come back to meeting number 4, you're going to bring that individual information back. You've done some working on your own. You know if there's some glitches or if you've thought of some new things, and you'll bring that back to the table and get feedback from everyone. Again, that's one of the nice things. You're not alone in this planning. You'll think about the schedule for the unit. You've decided you want it to be 2 weeks long around election time. So that's, end of October, 1st of November. But you look at the actual schedule at this point and you see that on Thursday of that second week, there's an in-service, so students aren't in school that day. So how are you going to work around that? And maybe there's a reason to stretch the unit out to 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks. Those decisions will be made together. You'll also look at student groupings, because in middle school we do a lot of grouping and regrouping. You'll want to do that here as part of that unit. Maybe you want to make sure that, for example, that some kids who your team believes have some leadership ability, but they haven't really been put in a situation to demonstrate that, you may very deliberately put them in some groups where they do play that leader role or get some of those opportunities. You also would, as far as student groupings go, want to make sure that you have some large groupings, some small groupings. Maybe there's some activities where kids work in pairs, that kind of thing. So you want some variety. The types of instruction also. There's probably going to be some direct instruction, there always is, but you'll want to make sure that there's also a lot of interactive kinds of things. So you'll kind of monitor that together as you're organizing that unit. And because you're all bringing your own things back to the table, you can balance that fairly easily. And of course you will revisit, are those 3 curriculum goals being met? Meeting number 5 is a formative evaluation meeting. It really happens during the unit. So going back to meeting number 4 for a moment, or how many ever meetings number 4 you have, when you're done with those, you're ready to go with the unit. So now you're in the midst of the unit and you will do a formative evaluation meeting. And basically that's just to kind of check, is it going the way we wanted it to go? It's a way to monitor and to modify if you need to. Let's say that there's an example of you've got a particular student grouping that for this series of activities is simply not working, and it's very apparent to most of the team members, if not everyone. You can modify that then. You can come together, make the decision, and do that modification. Again, if this is a brand new unit, you'll probably meet several times for a formative evaluation meeting. And then the last one is a summative evaluation meeting. It happens after the unit is over. And most of the time, as with anything, once something is newly over, we think we know everything that happened in the unit. So we know the things that went very well, we know the things that didn't go well, and we think we won't forget those. But if next year we want to try this unit again, we will have forgotten some of those details. So at the summative evaluation meeting, it's a very good idea to take some pretty complete notes about what went well, what did not go well, so that the next time you do the unit, you can make modifications, because of course you'll have a new group of students as well. If the unit is planned very well, it's easy to reuse the unit the next year, making some modifications based on the group of students that you have. Now I know in our example with the elections, there won't be a presidential election anyway the next year, but with other examples you certainly can use them year after year. There are other purposes for team meetings besides planning the units together. For example, there are always housekeeping details to attend to. Making sure that the field trip permission slips are in. Maybe there's information from administration above you that needs to be distributed to the team members and discussed. You all know what those details are. One of the issues with teams is that if they don't limit themselves to about 5 minutes for housekeeping details at the beginning of their team time, oftentimes that takes up more time than it needs to. And I've known teams that will actually set a timer for themselves for 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off, they know they need to wrap it up so that they can get on to the more important things, the more important business that the team has to attend to. It's really easy to let the housekeeping kinds of details eat up about 15 or 20 minutes of your team time, and that is not the best use of your time. Secondly, it's a good idea to spend time talking about your students. And when we're saying student concerns here, but we do not mean only problems. We're also spending time talking about how well students are doing. It's really a time for the teachers to come together and talk about their common group of students. Occasionally, a teacher might have a concern about a particular student in his or her own content area. That teacher can bring that concern to the table, see if other teachers are seeing those same things with that student. They can talk together about that. Again, just like with the planning for the units, you're not alone in drawing conclusions about how you should proceed with a particular student. There's also planning other than units that will be done during the team time. We have not talked about advisory yet, but if your team has a good advisory program, it's entirely possible that your teachers on the team will be the ones deciding which kinds of activities you want to do during advisory, or maybe even creating those activities. And so some time might be spent on that. Same thing with exploratory. It's possible that the team might have a huge part in deciding what exploratory looks like. It's also a time to meet with specialists, administrators, parents, or other teachers. For example, if you don't have a special ed teacher on your team, which most teams don't, it's a great idea to have the special ed teacher or the resource teacher visit your team meeting on a regular basis in order to share information about students on your team who might be having their services. The communication is greatly enhanced if the specialist can come to the team meetings occasionally. Administrators visit team meetings sometimes. Sometimes the principal of the school will regularly rotate through team meetings and sit in on and participate in a team meeting, and that's a great idea. That really enhances the communication between you as teachers and administration. And it's a great idea for administrators to see teams in action. Parents sometimes will request meetings of the whole team, and we know that parents are not always available during the day, and we would have to accommodate that, of course, but sometimes they are, and they will request a meeting with all of the teachers on the team, and this is an excellent way to be able to meet that need and have the parents come during the team meeting time. As far as other teachers, occasionally you would like to invite other teachers in your building to come to your team meeting. Let's say, for example, you are trying something new in the area of technology on your team with your students. It might be part of a unit, but maybe it's not. You might invite, if you have one, your technology teacher or your technology person in your building to come in and sit on a few meetings to share information with you about how you can best implement whatever this new thing is that you're going to be doing in technology. Okay, so how does it all fit together then? How does a week look for teachers on a team as far as their common team planning time? Again, that's really up to the team, and they can decide how to use their days. For example, if you're leading up to a unit, it's obvious that you're going to be using a lot of your meetings working on that unit. But it doesn't mean all 5 days of the week leading up to that unit necessarily, but it may. Once you finish a unit, and you're going to have a little break of a few weeks perhaps before you begin another unit, or maybe longer than a few weeks before you go into that next unit, you may decide that your meeting times are going to follow a particular schedule. And so you may decide that on Tuesdays, always on Tuesdays, you're going to devote the entire team time after the housekeeping details to talking about student concerns. Now, that doesn't mean you cannot talk about students other times. Of course, you need to talk about them whenever it's necessary, but that's kind of the designated day to bring things to the table. And maybe you have a gifted child and it's real obvious that there needs to be some new things added to this child's curriculum. That would be a good time to talk about that and make some plans. Maybe you've designated Monday and Wednesdays to be unit types of activities. So if you are getting ready for a unit, you can use that for that specific planning, but you can, even if you're not getting ready for a unit, there's others coming up. And so you can be doing some of those kind of preliminary meetings for those other upcoming units. Maybe you've decided that Thursday you want to set aside for other kinds of meetings. Maybe those are going to be the meetings with the specialists or the administrators or the parents. Or maybe you want to decide that Thursday will be the day to plan advisory activities. And it may be that that is only true in a particular part of the year. Maybe in the spring you spend several weeks in a row and you decide, okay, Tuesdays and Thursdays we're going to use to plan advisory activities for the next academic year. Fridays, maybe you want to keep open and you decide you're going to use it however you need to that particular week. Maybe all the issues with student concerns didn't get resolved and you can return to that. Maybe a parent has requested a meeting for that Friday. You could use it for that as well. Also, when we look at the units, when we're planning those units, there's an ongoing overlapping kind of process going on. And you might want to go back to the slide that lists those 6 meetings. So for example, if we talk about our example election unit, you probably started to plan that the spring before. So you probably did meeting number 1 and number 2 the spring before, maybe even meeting number 3. And then in the fall, you will do meeting number 3 maybe, and meeting number 4 in preparation for the unit that's coming up later. But also, right away in the fall, you may have a meeting number 1 for the unit that's coming up in December or in January. So there's always that overlapping process that's occurring, and that would have to fit in to what your week looks like with your team meetings. So when we look at all of this, it's very apparent why middle school teachers need a common team planning time. It's impossible to get all of this done plus their own individual planning if they only have one planning period a day. And the 2 planning periods are extremely essential.